there's some hard truths that I've got to talk about today. We've got a special show talking about really all the damage the Republicans could still yet do in a show entitled How Many More Will Die from the Republicans' Obsessive Lust for Power at All Costs. I don't plan to mince words. I hope you'll tune in for it, whatever platform you're listening on, and please share it with your friends. We begin in 5 minutes.
Live from our nation's capital, it's the Inside Scoop with Mark Levine.
Good afternoon, America. Welcome to the Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Mark Levine, on a pretty traumatic time in our nation's history. We have now faced 200,000, more than 200,000 Americans officially dead by the coronavirus. 200,000 Americans whose deaths were almost entirely preventable. Let's just say at least 99% of them were preventable. 200,000 Americans that would have been alive today had the person who was supported by most Americans, Hillary Clinton, been president of the United States. Donald Trump and his Republican Party have killed 200,000 innocent Americans, and the death toll is just beginning. It's likely to be 300,000 or more by the end of the year. How many Americans have died and will die because of the Republicans' lust for power? How much does the GOP truly hate democracy? Didn't used to be true. Used to be there were two parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, and they would fight over ideas, but both of them believed in the United States of America. Both of them believed that we, the people of the United States of America, should be in charge of our country. 155 years ago or so, President Abraham Lincoln gave his famous Gettysburg Address. He ended that address by asking that we all resolve that this nation shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. Our republic, government by the people, for the people, went on life support the moment Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg drew her last breath. We will officially have an end to our democratic republic 1 week before Election Day. So what am I talking about? What do I mean? What do you mean I mean, sure, we've had bad president, bad Senate. What are you talking about, the end of the republic? Well, think about what a republic is. Think about what democracy is. Thomas Jefferson wrote in the Declaration of Independence that a democracy is a republic, is government by the consent of the governed. That the only fair and just way that men, and he was only talking about men at the time, but the only fair and just way that men constitute government is to do so by and with the consent of the governed. Never in American history have we had less consent of the governed, at least since we allowed blacks and women to vote. Now, it's true, at the time of the Declaration of Independence, it was white men with property. And no doubt, most of the Republican Party want to go back to those days. But at least white men with property could vote, and the most votes were counted, and the person with the most votes won. Or if they didn't, at least the Congress was controlled by the people with the most votes. And later on, the property restrictions went away. And then women were given the right to vote in the 20s, and blacks were finally given the right to vote in the 1960s. But we have never before in American history had a president who won after losing dramatically the popular vote. The people, remember, rejected Donald Trump. More than 3 million Americans preferred Hillary Clinton over Donald Trump. That used to be uncommon. And now you're like, oh, okay, Mark's just ranting about the Electoral College. Well, I am ranting about the Electoral College. It's true that I believe in a democracy. I believe in a consent of the governed. I believe that the only just government is one where the majority of the people, we the people, get to determine who our leaders are. I believe, as Abraham Lincoln did, in government by the people, for the people, of the people. But of course, that's happened now twice in the last 20 years. In fact, do your math, you'll find that Democrats have won 6 out of the last 7 presidential elections. George Bush barely won one in 2004. So, okay, the president was rejected by the American people. He's illegitimate. But what about Congress? Well, the House is represented by Democrats right now. But due to Republican gerrymandering, it's a much smaller majority than we would have if we had fair districts. And we know that both parties gerrymander, but we should also know that Republicans gerrymander at far greater numbers than the Democrats do, and always have. The Democrats gerrymandered Maryland and squeezed out one more congressional seat. That's true. The Republicans gerrymandered Florida, Georgia, Michigan, Indiana, Pennsylvania, Ohio, North Carolina. Those are just the ones, Wisconsin. Those are just the ones off the top of my head. They've gerrymandered 30, 40 seats that the people of America didn't choose, that the people of their states didn't choose. But merely by playing with the rules, by manipulating the system, they were able to get more seats in the House they otherwise would have. It's only because dramatically more Americans prefer Democrats over Republicans that we have the majority we have in the House. The United States Senate, of course, is worse. Democrats represent some 55 to 60% of the American people in the United States Senate. Republicans represent about 40%. But Republicans have a majority in the Senate. Now, again, that's by design. It's in our Constitution, 2 senators for every state. But it's worth noting that the Senate, like the president, has been rejected by the American people. It's kind of like apartheid, right? Under South Africa's system of laws, only the white people could vote. And you could say it's a just system because according to the laws of South Africa, the white people got their rights. And according to the Constitution as currently crafted, the President of the United States, having been rejected by the American people, is still president. And the United States Senate, having been rejected by the American people, is still Senate. It's still running it. But until now, until a week before Election Day, we have never had a Supreme Court also chosen by a minority of the American people in both the executive and legislative branches. Never. In fact, prior to Donald Trump's election, there have been presidents that were chosen by a minority of the people. Prior to George W. Bush, there was John Quincy Adams, Benjamin Harrison, and Rutherford B. Hayes. But in those 3 examples, you'll find that their Supreme Court picks were all picked by a supermajority of the Senate, 80, 90% of the Senate, representing a majority of the American people. So they were legitimate. They were, if the United Nations were to come down and examine the American elections, apart from the fact they didn't include women, they didn't include black people, which is pretty big, but at least among the whites who could vote, like apartheid South Africa, they were legitimate. When did we stop getting legitimate members of the court? Well, when George W. Bush became president, right? He was elected by a minority, and his senators were elected by a minority. But it got much, much worse under Donald Trump. In Donald Trump's 2 justices so far, Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, clearly the president was solidly rejected by the American people. At least it was 500,000 votes in Bush. It was 3 million with Hillary Clinton. And the Senate has never represented a smaller proportion because at least back in the Bush years, you had the filibuster. So you had to get a 60-vote margin. So at least in those days, you had to get some bipartisan support. So now we have those 2 justices, Bush's 2 justices, and may she rest in peace with the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. We are likely to have a majority of the court, 5 justices, none of whom represent the American people. All of them put there undemocratically. Now, I know that Republicans don't care about that. They don't give a damn about democracy. Democracy isn't important to Republicans. The Republic isn't important to Republicans. They just want raw power. I get it. But do most Americans even see that? Before we get into the fact that Donald Trump has been bragging that he doesn't care how many people die so long as he gets elected. And by the way, that includes his own supporters, right? When a conservative Republican who works for Vice President Pence says that she heard Trump say repeatedly that he doesn't like those disgusting people, his own supporters. He doesn't like touching them and shaking their hands. But he doesn't care if they die as long as he gets his rallies. We'll get her exact quote for you coming up after the break. But we know they don't care about the American people. We know they don't care about loyalty to the American government as they consort with dictators. But now it should be clear that the Republican Party is a threat to democracy itself. It's not going to get easier between now and November. We'll be back with more after this.
If you're worried your friend may be struggling, remember, you don't have to be there to be there.
You can say how are you or get a fake tattoo. You can ask with an app if it works for you. You can write them a text or knit them a sweater. If you can't be together, you can write them a letter. Whatever gets you talking. Whatever gets you talking.
threaten strikes or to speak out against militarization were met with harsh reprisals. By 1914, the Canadian IWW had less than 1,000 members. In May of 1918, 18 Canadian IWW leaders were arrested while they attended a meeting in Ottawa. Those arrested were immigrants and were sent to a labor internment camp. Then the Canadian government moved to ban the organization altogether. The ban against the IWW would last until the end of World War I. Those found to be affiliated with the Union faced up to 5 years in prison. 13 other organizations were also banned in Canada, including the Chinese Labor Association and the Social Labor Party. The act further read that it was illegal to attend meetings, except religious services, during the present war at which the proceedings are conducted in the language of any country with which Canada is at war, or in the languages of Russia, Ukraine, or Finland. After the war, the IWW was once again allowed in Canada and slowly began to rebuild. But the scars inflicted during the war years took a lasting toll on the union's membership. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
He's a Bible-quoting, Constitution-loving, flag-waving, red-blooded, liberal American. He's Mark Levine. Give him a call now. He's a Fulbright scholar. 888-488-MARK. That's 888-488-6275.
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Mark Levine. The death of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg left me shaken, numb, grasping for air. I thought she was indomitable. She'd beaten cancer 4 times. She was an icon, a hero, a legend. Her brilliance was staggering. Her compassion endless. In her tiny, fragile frame lay all of our hopes and dreams. Yet I, with misplaced confidence in all that is good, ridiculously believed that her fierce desire to live and to make our country a land of equality and justice for all somehow had the power to conquer death itself, at least for a few more months. I was sadly, terribly wrong. The notorious RBG is gone. She took her last breaths at the very last moments of the Jewish year 5780, a truly dreadful year, a year that, thank God, is over. But her legacy remains with us as we enter 5781. Ruth Bader Ginsburg taught men at the highest levels of power, and they were all men in those days that she began her crusade, that gender, like race, is a construct, that the differences between men and women have been magnified by culture and centuries of unquestioned belief into ridiculous stereotypes, that gender roles confined women and men into prisons of conformity and put hurdles in the way of our individual pursuits of happiness. She taught us that women could be the best lawyers and have the finest legal minds. She taught us that men could be the kindest parents and caregivers. She taught us that the government had no business forcibly assigning any of us into our designated slots. She taught us that we are all human, that those who would forcibly delineate male or female roles for us were as damaging to human freedom as the radical authoritarian states that would choose our professions for us. RBG gave us freedom, the power to be ourselves. It is impossible to imagine the world we now live in without her. A world where women are taken seriously, where we have a female Speaker of the Virginia House of Delegates, where I, as an openly gay man, am regularly criticized, as I should be, for my thoughts, my words, and my deeds, but virtually never any longer for my sexual orientation. I have a transgender colleague, Delegate Danica Roan, who serves well and ably, and with the gender of her birth being an afterthought. We now have a world where people with different physical and mental abilities are valued more for their humanity than their differences, at least by the majority of Americans. I recognize our president doesn't recognize their humanity. Even religious faith, the ability to talk about our religious faith, is no longer seen as much as a barrier to our success, but in honor. I have a connected affinity to Justice Ginsburg, who's not only the first woman to lie in state in the history of the United States, and is lying in state right now in the rotunda, but the first Jewish person to lie in state. At the time she first tried to work, she was rejected for being a woman, for being Jewish. Today, I think more Americans, again, with the exception of Donald Trump and his supporters, recognize that whatever religious faith you have, or non-religion, atheists and agnostics, that we have a lot more in common as Americans than the beliefs which divide us. I know we're not quite there yet. We obviously still face gender and racial and ethnic and religious and socioeconomic inequalities and prejudices. And yes, under the current president, the inequality has been magnified. He openly attacks those who've been traditionally disparaged, right? Women, minorities, immigrants, those with disabilities. He attacks, and his supporters attack fellow Americans with a passion and fervor not seen since Ruth Bader Ginsburg began her career in the 1950s, when she was first in her class, but unemployable, because nobody wanted a lady lawyer. Our world is shaken, but that doesn't mean we should despair. There's no time to despair. There is work to be done. We must all act with resolve and with confidence. Would the notorious RBG have tolerated a bunch of us moping at her loss? I think she'd appreciate all the crowds who are gathering right now in Washington, D.C., just across the river from me, to mourn her lying in state. But she wouldn't tolerate us moping for long. Not for a moment. Remember, this is the same justice who issued a Supreme Court ruling from the bench the very day after losing the love of her life, her husband of 56 years, Marty Ginsburg, a man who sincerely believed in gender equality long before it became a commonplace idea. Yes, Ruth Bader Ginsburg was indomitable. Maybe that's why I thought she would live forever, or at least a few more months. Few of us have the mental or physical fortitude of this tiny giant. I don't call on any of us to mirror her brilliance, her strength, her greatness. With a few exceptions like Thurgood Marshall, yeah, that's impossible. We can't come close to matching that. But ancient Talmudic wisdom comes to mind. As our rabbis wrote thousands of years ago, it is not your responsibility to complete the work of perfecting our world, but you are required to do your part. Let us all resolve in her name, in her honor, in her legacy, and in her blessed memory, to redouble our efforts to finish the job she set out to do. She gave us a fantastic head start, but now she is gone. The baton is at our feet. Pick it up. Run. We'll be right back after this.
He's a Fulbright scholar, and he speaks French, but he couldn't tell you who won the Super Bowl. It's Mark Levine. Give him a call now at 888-488-MARK. That's 888-488-6275.
Hey, Dad, how do airplanes fly? What's in this box? Can I touch this? Where does sand come from? Is this tree good for climbing? What happens if I mix these two things together? How are babies made? What does this thing do?
Kids are curious about everything, including guns. Talking to them about gun safety in your home is a good first step, but you can do more. Always keep your guns locked, unloaded, and stored separately from ammunition. Storing your guns securely is the best way to prevent family fire, including unintentional shootings. For more information on safe gun storage and ways to keep your family safe, visit endfamilyfire.org. That's endfamilyfire.org.
What do we keep in the attic? What's this thing called? Can I ride my bike backwards?
Like I said, kids are curious. It's up to us to keep them safe. Brought to you by End Family Fire, Brady, and the Ad Council.
Wake up and text. Text and eat. Text and catch the bus. Text and miss your stop. Wait. Text and be late to work.
Sorry, I'm late.
Text and work. Text and pretend to work. Text and act surprised when someone calls you out for not working.
Who, me?
Text and meet up with a friend you haven't seen in forever.
Hi.
Oh, hey.
Text and complain that they're on their phone the whole time. Text and listen to them complain that you're on your phone the whole time. Text and whatever. But when you get behind the wheel, give your phone to a passenger. Put it in the glove box. Just don't text and drive. Visit StopTextsStopWrecks.org. A public service announcement brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
For millions of people around the globe, especially young people, the pressing issue of our time is this: the world is on fire. On fire with climate change, creating a new and intensifying norm of deadly weather extremes that make a dystopian future a distinct possibility. Constant wildfires, rising seas, desertification, global crop failures, widespread hunger, water shortages, etc. Luckily, we are a sentient species with the scientific ability to know that the chief cause of this global destruction is not angry gods, but us, specifically humankind's massive extraction and burning of oil, gas, coal, and other fossil fuels. So there's a rising chorus of people shouting, "Fire!" And sure enough, our national government is rushing to the scene to put it out. Unfortunately, our president and his crew of right-wing fire breathers in Congress are not directing the government's hoses at the corporate extractors, but at us, the people, scientists, environmentalists, and other activists who've dared to point to the flames and call for global action to stop the conflagration. They seem to think the problem will go away if they can make the protesters go away. Worse, they're fanning the flames by turning the EPA into the PPA, the Polluters Protection Agency. They're slashing dozens of public restraints on the polluters while also opening up our oceans and wilderness areas to their polluting greed and stalling the rational shift to a green energy future. This is Jim Hightower saying the good news is that the people are revolting, in the very best sense of that term, revolting against our corrupt leaders' rush toward climate catastrophe. Our hope is not in leaders, but ourselves, as it has been throughout American history. From the Boston Tea Party forward, creative and gutsy public protest has been democracy's best friend.
He's a Harvard economist and a Yale lawyer. He does not keep up with the Kardashians. He's Mark Levine. Give him a call now at 888-488-MARK. That's 888-488-6275.
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Mark Levine. Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg is gone, and it's easy to despair, just like it was easy to despair the night Hillary Clinton won the 2016 election. But due to the quirks of our system, was not allowed to take power. It's easy to despair as the Republicans do their best to pack the court yet again, violating centuries of rules put in place to ensure fairness, whether it's ending the filibuster that used to be around for Supreme Court justices, getting rid of so-called blue slips that allowed home state senators to have a role in choosing Supreme Court justices, or, yes, packing the court, making up new rules, such as that in the last year of a presidency, you can't appoint new justices, even if the election is 10 months away, and then changing them when the election is a month away, because, let's face it, it's about raw lust for power. As we watch Republicans dismantle our democracy, we have to sincerely ask, how many more Americans will they kill before we get out in the streets? How many have they killed already? Well, just from COVID-19, we know they've killed at least 200,000. Now, I know what you're going to say, Mark, Trump didn't start the virus. That's true. That's true. We got the virus the same day South Korea did. And their population is 1/6 ours. And they've had I think now slightly over 300 deaths. So multiply it by 6 and say that if we had a competent president, 2,000 Americans still would have died. That's a lot. That's 2/3 of 9/11. But we're already at 202, or 67 times 9/11. And that's not all, folks. I remember when Trump first said that 100 to 240,000 Americans could die. And I remember saying right here on this radio show that I thought he was just trying to scare people and give these maximum numbers so that we would feel better when only 30 or 40 or 50,000 Americans died 10 or 15 times 9/11. I was wrong. I underestimated the president's monstrosity. And for that, I apologize. I think many Americans have been underestimating the president's monstrosity and corruption and lack of care for ordinary Americans, well, for a long time. Anyone who could ever believe in this president, you have to think, is somewhat mentally ill themselves, given that he's had 20,000 lies plus documented, according to the Washington Post. Sometimes it's fun to go through that list. Fun being maybe the wrong term. Interesting to go through that list and just pick a number at random. 11,426. There's the lie. There's the documentation. You got to feel for the people who chronicle these things. It's a lot of work. But I'm just asking how many more will die. I mean, 200,000 are dead. It's likely much higher than that. Some studies suggest that as many as 10 times as many people have coronavirus as have been reported. I don't know that it's that high, but even if it's just 2 or 3 times, how many hundreds of thousands has Trump already killed? 300,000, 400,000? Even if it's only 200,000, that's a lot of Americans that would be alive today. It's a lot of people's parents, fathers and mothers and sisters and brothers, and yes, sometimes kids. We all know that Donald Trump admitted to Bob Woodward that he knew that kids could get the virus, even though he lied about it just yesterday. Because, as he told Bob Woodward, he wanted to play it down. He didn't want American people to know how dangerous it was. He didn't want them to stop what they were doing and wear masks the way they had to do in places like South Korea and Italy and France and England and Japan and every other nation on the earth, given that we have the highest death rate in the world. No nation comes close to the number of people dead from this virus. Remember, the whole world got this virus. It didn't start in Texas. It started on the other side of the planet, in China. And it spread to the entire globe. South Korea is a heck of a lot closer to China than we are, as is Japan and Singapore and New Zealand and Australia, and they're all handling it much better. So is Europe. So is Canada. Canadians aren't that different from us, but their death rate is in the hundreds, not in the hundreds of thousands. I think while we have 1,000 plus die a day, I think their death rate yesterday was like 40. But to a Trumpist, it doesn't matter, right? They're true believers. Herman Cain, Republican, believed in Donald Trump, went to a rally without a mask because that's what the president wanted, and died. I didn't see too much discussion among Republicans about the death of Herman Cain. I doubt they could look at a camera given that their rhetoric killed the man. But let's put aside the 200, 300, 400,000 Americans Trump has already killed. By the way, only 400,000 or so servicemen died in World War II. That was over 4 years. We've had half that number in 6 months. Putting that aside, how many more will die? Well, even by the time Joe Biden, if he's elected, becomes president, another 100,000, 150,000, they say, maybe another 200,000 will be dead because of Trump's malfeasance in office. I do think once Biden's elected, the numbers will start to go down. It takes time, but I suspect that they will peak under Trump and finally start to go down under a competent president. But I'm not just talking about the virus. Let's talk about healthcare. One of the reasons why Trump wants to ram through a Supreme Court justice is he wants to take your healthcare away. Trump fervently believes that if you have a pre-existing condition, you have a genetic condition, you have something that's not your fault, that you were born with, a treatable condition, that if you don't have money, you should die. Die. And die quickly, please. Because if you stick around, it's going to cost money. Trump says he has a plan to help people with pre-existing conditions. He said it's going to show up in weeks. He said it would show up in weeks 3 months ago, and 6 months ago, and a year ago, and 2 years ago, and 3 years ago, and 4 years ago during his campaign. He said it would show up in weeks. He has a magic plan whereby he takes everybody off their insurance, lets them all die, but magically they're all re-healed. I'm not quite sure how it happens. Maybe it's hydroxychloroquine. I have to check the... He has no plan, obviously. It may be that Trump can kill more by destroying the Affordable Care Act than by COVID. I don't know. It'd be an interesting comparison. Well, he killed several 100,000 by 400,000 by COVID. He killed 400,000 by taking away people's health care. Fun game. Oh, and let's not forget sheer cruelty. There are still kids today in cages. 3-year-olds, 6-year-olds, forcibly separated from their parents whom they will never see again. Now, most of us think that what happened to Japanese Americans during World War II when whole families were rounded up and put in detention camps having done nothing wrong, or what the Chinese are doing to the Uyghur Muslims, again, whole families rounded up, put in concentration camps who've done nothing wrong. We think these are bad things. This, of course, is much worse. Here, Trump is separating families. I can't think of a dictator evil enough to separate families since, well, Adolf Hitler. Now, he gassed them. We haven't gassed the immigrants yet, although we've killed a few of them. Guards have raped some of them. But just think how cruel it is to rip a child away from his grieving mother, from her grieving father. Think about your kids and how you'd feel if the government ripped them away from you and they were never allowed to even know who you are. They couldn't contact you because they didn't even know their real names at age 1 or 2 or 3. That will continue if Donald Trump is reelected. Sheer cruelty. That's not it, of course. We'll have much more gun violence. Republicans seems to revel in gun violence. Oh yeah, massacres. Yeah, nothing we can do. Oh well. They defend the guy in Kenosha, Wisconsin, who drives from Illinois with his gun. And I haven't even gotten to how they treat protesters yet. Republicans are not just a threat to democracy, they're a threat to American life itself. And we'll finish right after this break.
America, your children have an amazing superpower. They can help save lives by not having play dates. That's right. By replacing get-togethers with virtual play dates and video chats, they can help slow the evil spread of germs. And if your superheroes do go outside, make sure they continue their superhero wing by staying 6 feet away from others to protect everyone in America land. Find out more at coronavirus.gov. A message from the CDC and the Ad Council. America, your children have an amazing superpower. That's right. They can help save lives by simply washing their hands. Just 20 seconds of thorough hand washing after they've coughed or sneezed or been outside can help fight against the dastardly spread of germs. Armed with only soap and water and hands, your superhero can protect you, your family, and everyone out there in America land. Amazing! Find out more at coronavirus.gov. A message from the CDC and the Ad Council.
He was the heart of your family, and he taught you our history. He helped you fix your first flat. He was the best backyard DJ around. And every time he'd tell a story, he'd own the room. But now more than ever, he may feel alone. Today, older adults and their loved ones are struggling to connect, in a time when connection has never been more important. But there is something we can do. Embrace our older loved ones through StoryCorps Connect. With StoryCorps Connect, you can honor seniors remotely with an interview about their life. Every interview will be archived at the Library of Congress, becoming part of American history, so that years from now, future generations can listen in.
All right, Grandpa, what's one piece of advice you have for me?
Just
So I'm actually told that my producer can shut off the ads for those that listen on Facebook and allow me to comment to you in the middle. We'll have to see if this is working. Hopefully it is. We do have some lines open. Encourage people to call in. I got one person on the line, 888-488-MARK, 888-488-6275. I know it's been a grim discussion today, but I'll try to end with a little bit of hope. So we will come back in 90 seconds. Please stay tuned. And if you want to call in, it's 888-488-MARK, 888-488-MARK, or 888-488-6275 for those of you who like numerals. We'll be back in 1 minute.
In our protest, making sure that the immigrant voice was lifted up, and he and his wife became extremely active in our fight for immigrant justice. It was just so sad to see him pass away too. He was a construction worker who picked up the virus at the construction site. It was the workers who actually let him know that another worker had also tested positive but was also very ill in the hospital. He had been in very close contact with this worker, and he had obviously pre-existing conditions too. He had been sick before. He didn't have access to health care. And so what happened is he very quickly had to be intubated, and he passed away. He died undocumented. Immigration reform never came. Access to health care never came. And so it's time that we actually help these families.
Find more Code Whack episodes on progressivevoices.com and on the PV app. You can also listen to Code Whack at heal-ca.org. This podcast is powered by Heal California, uplifting the voices of those fighting for healthcare reform around the country. I'm Brenda Gazar.
Never confuse Mark Levine with right-winger Mark Levin. The second E stands for empathy, which the other Mark lacks. Give him a call now at 888-488-MARK. That's 888-488-6275.
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Mark Levine. I know it's been a pretty grim show today. I recognize that our nation is facing its greatest threat possibly since the Civil War, maybe since the Great Depression. Don't know that we really need to compare. We are in danger. In mentioning the threats of this presidency continuing, I didn't even get to the wildfires in California, in Oregon, Washington State, where the sky is orange because climate change is winning and we're doing nothing about it, and this president is only making things worse. The fact that our sky is orange and we've had the greatest wildfires in American history and record temperatures north of the Arctic Circle, including over 100 north of the Arctic Circle, tells you how much danger we're in. That's not even the lead story. I promised you the video from Olivia Troy. I will play it for you. you should hear in her own words, because she's a conservative Republican who worked for Donald Trump. Excuse me, she worked for Mike Pence. She worked for the vice president. And that's why I want you to hear her words. This is not some liberal. This is someone who is truly horrified by what she saw in her government. Hold on, I'm told you can't hear it. All right, I'll turn it off. I'm sorry you can't hear it. I'm told you can't hear it. You should check out Olivia Troye, Olivia Troye, and listen to her 2 minutes of discussion. Basically, she describes how the president doesn't give a damn for the American people. He shows, and you should hear it from her, because after all, she's a dyed-in-the-wool conservative, worked for Mike Pence, how the president showed, quote, a flat-out disregard for human life, unquote, because, quote, his main concern was the economy and his re-election. She says the president's rhetoric and his own attacks against people in his administration trying to do the work, as well as the promulgation of false narratives and incorrect information of the virus, have made this ongoing response a failure. She also describes graphically how he did not want to touch the hands of those disgusting people around him, namely his own supporters. You know the ones with the MAGA hats that cheer him at the rallies without a mask and end up infecting and killing each other. Yeah, he doesn't think much of them either. Sorry I don't have that clip. I'll ask you to look for it yourself. We face a true crisis in our democracy, one that we have never seen before. Worse than the McCarthy era, worse than the 1930s. The only time I can think of that is similar would be the Civil War. As I mentioned, we already have a minority government, and we'll have a clear minority when the Republicans vote to elect a Supreme Court justice. When the minority president, rejected by the American people by millions of votes, and the minority Senate, rejected by the vast majority of Americans, choose a Supreme Court justice whose views are antithetical to the vast majority of Americans, this, my friends, is dictatorship. This is apartheid. This is a minority controlling the majority. This is not consent of the governed. I'm afraid Abraham Lincoln's prayer, the government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from the earth, well, it's not perishing in Canada or France or the UK, but it's perishing here in these United States a week before the election. But we can revive it. I still think we will have some semblance of a free election. I recognize that the Republicans will put their thumb on the scale. They've said, despite the fact that the Constitution of the United States bans poll taxes, that in Florida, we're going to have poll taxes. We've got to keep the black people from voting, as they strip black people of their right to vote in Georgia, remove black people from the voting rolls in violation of the Voting Rights Act, as they work to make sure that those of us who vote by mail are disenfranchised, as they work to make sure that ballots are not counted. In Pennsylvania, a court just ruled that if you don't put your ballot in the right envelope, and 6% of voters in the last election did not, you lose your right to vote. We're finding that now that Donald Trump is saying he doesn't believe in the peaceful transfer of power, even if he loses the election. If he loses, then by definition, it must be rigged. And he's going to look to try to get states to invalidate their own people's election. And who knows who his toady attorney general will indict? All of the opponents, perhaps, of Donald Trump? Given that our Justice Department no longer cares about justice, we are teetering at the edge of the end of democracy. When Michael Bloomberg offered to pay the former felons of Florida's poll taxes so that they could vote, he's being investigated. I guess that would have happened too if a white person in Mississippi tried to pay black people's poll taxes. Republicans all across the country are struggling to maintain power because they know that the people do not want them in power. They know that the only way they can win is by cheating. And that's why they're cheating right and left. They're accepting aid from Russia. They're squelching information from Russia, from the CIA. They're refusing to let our intelligence branches tell us about the threats from Donald Trump's boss, Vladimir Putin. Is he going to disallow legitimate ballots now? Is he trying to fill the Supreme Court so that when the inevitable election case comes and Roberts, believing at least in his country more than his party, joins with the three liberals to say that every vote should be counted, maybe there'll still be 5 justices that say, no, we don't allow vote counting in America. Vote counting is wrong. We hate democracy. We impose our will on the public. Then what will happen? Will people take to the streets? Will there be violence? Will there be civil war? We have never had a government in American history where every single branch of government is a minority. Never. Where the president was rejected. And listen, if Donald Trump wins the electoral count, I'm quite confident he'll lose the majority of the American people. Where the Senate is rejected by the American people. Where the House is more Republican than it would be if the American people all had equality under the law, as our Constitution is supposed to have. Where the Supreme Court no longer reflects the American people. Gutting campaign finance laws. What will the Supreme Court do? Make sure that more women die from illegal abortions as they strive their best to control their own autonomy, but the Supreme Court says, no, you've got to bear your rapist's kid. If someone rapes you, he has a right to your baby. That's likely coming from the U.S. Supreme Court. Think about it, women, or men who care about women. Women will be raped, and the rapist will have a right to that child. Or the woman goes to jail. We know as they increase the power of corporations, as they try to exclude immigrants from the census counts, despite the fact that the Constitution says every person must be counted, as they work to gerrymander every state in the United States to favor Republicans, as they make sure that a few rich people get to control our campaign finance, as they work most especially to remove Black Americans from the voting rolls with almost surgical precision. Don't be surprised by Donald Trump saying that he doesn't believe in the peaceful transfer of power. Don't be surprised by that. Who do you think he is? Adams? Jefferson? No, his heroes are Putin and Turkey's Erdogan and North Korea's Kim Jong-un. And how do we know this? Because he said so. These are the people he looks up to. He loved the Premier Xi of China back when Xi was cracking down on Hong Kong protesters. He praised him for his handling of the coronavirus before condemning him to try to get the press off his back. Do you not recognize that your country is teetering on the edge? I need your help, folks. I need you not just to go out and vote. I need you to make sure that every single person you know gets out and votes. And not just for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, but in the Senate, in the House of Representatives, in your state legislature. Please do not forget your state legislature. I'm speaking of this as a state legislator. We need Democrats up and down the ballot. If Biden only wins by 3 or 4%, they can and will steal this thing. The only way forward for American democracy is for Biden to win in a landslide, and I need you to make that happen. This is Mark Levine signing off.
Mark, we're still live on the live stream, so if you want to take Michael, we actually are still open.
Oh, we are? Okay.
Yeah. still
You know
live
what?
there.
I will. I thought my time was up.
Well,
I
it is
didn't
on
know that I
radio,
could do
but
that.
we have unlimited here on the
All
live
right.
stream. So
Fair enough. And
all right.
Michael's been waiting a long time. So
Okay.
live from the Bronx, it's Old Faithful. Michael, you can't. I had to get all my words out, but now I have time for you. So please, let's chat.
Oh,
You're on the air, Michael.
The radio airtime is up. It's still on live stream. Sorry.
There you are.
Michael, go ahead.
How are you, my buddy? Old Faithful. How are you, sir?
Hi, can you hear me?
I hear you now. We're good. We're good to go.
Okay, great, Mark. Well, yeah, Old Faithful from the Bronx, but vacationing up at Cape Cod, Massachusetts for one good reason. Wife and I just celebrated our 20th wedding anniversary.
Well, congratulations. It must be sad. I know the Bronx isn't quite Brooklyn, but they're close enough, and you lost a true legend. New York City did.
I know.
This week.
Ruth Bader Ginsburg, absolutely.
Yeah.
But what is so upsetting to me, Mark, is first of all, you gave every single reason why Trump is losing more and more supporters. He certainly didn't have the Democrat support because Democrats knew how the hell he was. He lost the independent vote, and now we're finding more and more Republicans turning against him as well. It's like when enough is enough. And the thing that gets me ticked off, I've had even a debate with people in my own church. The church is divided as much as the Republican Party is divided. And say, oh, you got to vote for Donald Trump because he's pro-life, and we got to overturn abortions and Roe v. Wade. I'm like, just stop for a minute. Trump is not pro-life, and the prime example is what you have cited, Mark, the COVID-19 deaths, 200,000
This
people.
idea that churches are saying, we really, really want to save all that sperm and egg and fetuses, but we don't give a damn about our old people dying. What kind of church is that? What kind of church is it that says, all our parishioners can die. We just want to make sure that poor black women have more babies.
It goes more than that, though, Mark. It goes more than that. And I thought I would have some reasonable Republicans in the church, just like you're finding Joe Scarborough being more and more reasonable, and other Republicans that are speaking out against. Yep, absolutely. And God bless him. God bless him for that. But it's like, how the hell is it you're going to be trivializing abortion? And we just mentioned the COVID-19. That's not even adding the thousands of people dead from violence that he has perpetrated and incited, usually along racial lines, police shootings or non-police shootings.
I'm wondering when people protest.
Trump.
Here's what I'm wondering: if he tries to steal the election, and I'm sure he will. He basically said he will, and he refuses to accept the results, and people come out in the streets and protest. Is he going to order the military to tear gas and rubber bullet the Americans? Will we become Belarus or Hong Kong or Tiananmen Square or the Russian Revolution? Are we going to? And if so, will the military then go up against our police? I mean, I fear civil war, Michael. I really do. I fear civil war. If we don't have a democracy where we can trust who our leaders are, and we don't believe that the election is fair, and even if Biden wins fairly, then Trump's going to send his people out in the streets to go out. I mean, he is truly doing his best to lead us into civil war. It's really scary.
That's the thing, Mark. That's the thing. You just hit the nail on the head. It's not the military, because the military is already fed up with Trump after the way he just trash-talked them after all the sacrifices they made. Though that so-called military police, as far as I'm concerned, that's a fake police. Those are what I was told, mercenaries and vigilantes. Just because they have a word police patch on their chest don't make it so they're unidentifiable.
I tell you, some of them are, Michael.
No badge.
We know because
the thing is,
we looked and saw who those police were, because in D.C., Donald Trump violated folks' constitutional rights to peacefully protest, and tear gas and rubber bulleted, and truly injured people. And who did he have do it? He actually had ICE do it. He had the immigration police do it. The folks who were at the borders who I guess hate Latinos and that's why many of them get their jobs. I don't know. I'm sure some of them are good people, but I haven't seen many of them that are good people. Anyway, we don't have a border in D.C. We don't have illegal immigrants that are coming into the District of Columbia. You can't even fly internationally into the district. You can fly into airports around it. What were they doing there? Well, I think ICE may be the one government branch that still supports Donald Trump. As I said, maybe they just hate immigrants. It's a shame because we used to have honorable people serve, but these people are not honorable people. Let me say this. If you follow orders and you shoot an American protester who's peacefully protesting with a rubber bullet and blind them or tear gas them or cause them to have respiratory injuries, you, sir, are a terrorist. You are not part of the government. We learned in World War II with the Nuremberg laws, you can't say I was just following orders. You know the Constitution of the United States that gives every American the right to peaceably assemble. If you violate the Constitution of the United States, I don't care that the president told you to do it. It's as wrong as the Germans who said they were just following orders. So,
and I will also add that those are giving such orders or inciting people to do that, they're terrorists as well.
Well, they're
terrorists as well. That's why it's important, everybody, to understand that Biden could win by a landslide, but Trump will try to get this overturned and have it go in his favor. He's already on record saying, get rid of the ballots and we'll have a peaceful continuation. Right. It's like, that sounds to me, he wants to abolish Election Day all in all and turn this into a authoritarian
and I have to tell you something.
And dictatorship.
If this minority Supreme Court, chosen by a president rejected by the American people and a Senate rejected by the American people, were to declare Trump the winner when all the localities make clear that Biden is the winner, I think the answer is we don't accept that either. We all go out into the streets and we defend our country. I mean,
and it's not just the presidency, but also the Senate too. That remember, 24.
I mean, I'm a little worried that the Supreme Court, they're afraid that if Democrats win, we're going to try to right the injustice. We're going to try to expand the court to stop the Republican court packing. And so in order to keep their power, remember, when you have them, so I was elected in my district by a solid majority of the people I represent. Actually, I got more than 90%.
And that was
right.
legitimate too.
Right. So what that means is that I can speak very freely, and I'm not afraid of debate. I'm not afraid of having free elections, because I believe that the people I represent mostly, largely, vast majority support what I do. That gives me confidence. I can walk around with pride. I can allow free and fair debate. I've had people protest outside my house, and as long as they don't bring guns, they're welcome to protest outside my house. There's nothing wrong with that. They don't scare me. But when you know you're illegitimate, you know you're insecure, you know that the people hate you and want you out of government, but you're only getting there because of rigged elections and technical tricks in the law and basically manipulating the law to suppress the vote, then you become, well, like the Egyptian dictator or the Iraqi dictator or the Chinese dictator or the Russian dictator. You do what you can in order to maintain power, and that's why you have to suppress dissent and protest. Confident, fully elected leaders don't fear protesters. We welcome them. In fact, a good leader sits down with protesters, chats with them, finds out what their concerns are.
To help them
in
understand.
Virginia, we are revamping police law. I've written laws on police reform. A bill I just wrote requiring a police officer to report on the misconduct of another police officer or that own police officer faces discipline. That so far has passed the House and the Senate of Virginia. It's not quite out yet because of conference. But the point is that when you are legitimately elected, you don't fear the people, you welcome the people. You don't fear criticism, you welcome criticism. You don't fear the press, you run to the press. I run right to the press. I don't hide from the press because I believe I'm right, and I know that the people support me. It's only when you're a dictator, only when you know you're wrong, only when you're in minority power because you've basically rigged an election or used a rigged system, those are the people that fear dissent. And that's why Republicans fear dissent so much, because they know that the American people have solidly rejected them. And the only way to knock them into their senses and get a party that respects democracy again is to have a massive, massive landslide. So massive that it's way beyond the margin of cheating, and to basically punish those that would attack our democracy. If you commit treason with Russia, if you go out and you assault a reporter, if you tear gas or shoot rubber bullets at protesters, if you go out there and suppress dissent, or I think it should be a criminal act to intentionally remove voters from the voting rolls for political reasons, whether you're suppressing the black vote or the youth vote or the absentee vote. I'd like to say minimum, and I don't believe in mandatory minimums, but I'm fine with this one, a mandatory minimum of 10 years in jail for anyone who tries to suppress a legal voter. Voting fraud is extremely rare, but voter suppression is very common. And maybe if we put those people in jail, folks would finally recognize that Jim Crow is wrong and the 60s are over and poll taxes are not allowed in our Constitution. And we need to make sure that these laws are forever gone. Go ahead, Michael.
And then since you're on that note, Mark, one major thing to do is go back to the deaths of Breonna Taylor, of George Floyd, and the numerous of African Americans killed by racist police or even racist non-police. Remember what I said to you before, that with these Republicans, the people of color are mainly Democratic voters. They know this, and thus, for every minority that is annihilated or incarcerated, that is one less opposition vote for them to contend with. So, with that in mind, and what you had just said, aren't these people, were they not registered voters? And why the hell is it Republicans always got to find some kind of BS excuse as to why that shooting was justified and why the police did this or did that? But when we go to audio, we go to video, and we go to Trump's stinking tweets, there's always a contradiction amongst that party within themselves. They always contradict themselves as to terms of principle and what the facts are. And they can never, ever explain how the hell is it that you want to justify and excuse a cop killing an unarmed person of color thinking, well, we thought they had a gun, we feared for our lives. But then you cops, white cops, are on video exercising restraint against a guy clearly armed and pointing a damn gun at you.
That's right.
And you're not firing
The
at
white guy
them.
comes with a gun into Michigan, the Michigan Capitol, and shouts in the face of someone without a mask, possibly infecting them, and nothing is done.
With the COVID.
17-year-old boy from Illinois, white boy, comes with his AR-15, or I forget which semi-automatic assault weapon he had, drives into Wisconsin at the time when police are in armored cars telling black protesters to go home. They're welcoming the white kid with the gun who shoots dead, who murders two innocent people, and puts his hands up, and they won't even accept him as he tries to surrender to them. We have major systemic racism in our police, and our departments, anyone who doesn't recognize that doesn't have their eyes open. That doesn't mean that every cop is a racist. What it means is that there is a systemic problem, and we are working in Virginia and many blue states to finally change our laws to get rid of it. I'm very proud of what we're doing here, but the only way it's ever going to happen in Wisconsin is to take back the Wisconsin government. The same was true in Minnesota. The same is true in Kentucky. You know, Breonna Taylor did not get justice because the Attorney General of Kentucky did not want to give her justice. And that's
you don't
why
think,
the people of Kentucky have to vote him out of office. Yeah.
You don't think that the U.S. Attorney General Bill Barr, who people are calling the personal attorney for Trump, had anything to do with that? Because remember, Trump is
I don't know. Nothing Bill Barr would do would surprise me right now. This is a man who has zero respect for the Constitution, the rule of law of the United States of America. So I just think the best thing for this country would be to see Bill Barr and Donald Trump in matching orange jumpsuits, because I think that they are true existential threats to the United States. Their crimes are greater than the police officer who murders an innocent black person. Their crimes are greater because they are trying to murder our democracy itself.
And everything we're everything we're discussing here, because I don't know how much time you have left, but everything we're discussing here, we need to keep note of this because of Trump and these Republicans getting so doggone desperate as they know they're given 1,000,001 reasons for the nation to be voting against them, and they don't want to listen to the people as they should be. It's like their mantra is, I don't care what the people say. I stay in office. I'm the one that is law and order, and I alone give the orders and make the decisions, and everyone must bow down to me. And
it's because
they
don't like democracy itself. Republicans are opposed
even though they
to
took
democracy
an oath
itself. They didn't used to be. They didn't used to be, but they are now. And I think that's why so many good people are former Republicans, even conservatives like George Will. George Will and I don't agree on much when it comes to political philosophy. But George Will, to his credit, recognizes that though he is a conservative, we can get past, conservatives can get past a liberal president, liberals can get past a conservative president, but none of us can get past an authoritarian one. Once you lose democracy, it's almost impossible to get it back. And democracies do decline. We saw Russia had democracy for a few months. Turkey had democracy for 60 years, and it's over now. We have to fight for our American democracy and recognize that the fact that you and I, Michael, could speak to each other and have people listen to us, that free speech may be the last thing that we can do. And we have to use that in order to get people out to vote and reclaim our democracy, because we have barely managed to survive 4 years of Donald Trump. I sincerely don't believe we could survive 8. And with that, Michael, I'm going to have to say goodbye. Thanks for calling in.
I have to go also. Thank you.
Tune in next week, everybody. All right. Thank you, Michael. And thank you, everyone, for listening to this extended broadcast of the Inside Scoop. We'll talk more next week.
And Mark, just to put one final point on that, people can go to iwillvote.com to make a voting plan, make sure they're registered to vote. There are options for vote by mail or vote in person, and it's very helpful for all of those things.
Excellent. Thank you, Mark, for that. And